It's begun recording. Hello everyone and welcome to the second MS Thesis talk presented by Akash Ganga. We are delighted to have Rakshita T today as our speaker for the day. Rakshita has recently completed her fifth year from ISAL Pune. She did her master's thesis with Professor Paolo Salucci at Sissa, Italy. So today she will be speaking about her MS thesis work and some of her projects and her astro journey at ISAR Pune in her 5 years. And she will be speaking on the nature of dark matter from its distribution in galaxies. So without further ado, I would like to hand over the mic to the speaker. Uh, Over to you, Rakshita.
Good evening, everyone. I'll be talking about my MS thesis work on the nature of dark matter from its distribution in galaxies. First, let me give a brief introduction to dark matter. So, in 1933, Fritz Zwicky calculated the total mass of the Coma galaxy cluster from velocity observations using the virial theorem. He found that the total mass that he calculated as such was less than the luminous mass observed. Hence, he hypothesized that there must be a new form of matter known as dark matter. So, rotation curves of spiral galaxies are profiles of the circular velocities Vc versus the galactocentric radii r. So these trace gravitational potential and mass distribution within galaxies. One of the first evidence for dark matter was the observation of the rotation curve of the Andromeda galaxy known as M31 by Vera Rubin in 1970. So these observations cannot be explained by the contribution of only luminous or baryonic matter. This is because if there was only luminous or baryonic matter present in the galaxies, the rotation curve would fall off as r to the power minus half in the outer regions. But instead, the observations suggest that they have a flat or rising profile in the outer regions of galaxies. So this is an example of a rotation curve for the M33 galaxy. So these black points represent the data points, and the orange one represents the contribution due to stars, and this blue one is due to gas. So we see that only baryonic matter cannot account for the data. So hence there is a need for another form that is of matter, that is dark matter. So this is non-luminous and it interacts gravitationally with baryonic matter. It should have no electric charge and it should be slow, that is non-relativistic at the time of formation. But there are also other alternative theories like modified gravity theories, which are proposed to explain observed rotation curves. One of them is modified Newtonian dynamics, known as MOND. So MOND aims to replace the Newton's law with this formalism, that is F equals ma into 1 plus a by a naught inverse. So in the limit a much greater than a naught, which is a constant, this just reduces to the usual Newton's law F equals ma. But when a is much less than a naught, it reduces to ma square by a naught. So this leads to the rotation curve being flat in the outer regions. Despite this, dark matter is still the most accepted theory to explain rotation curves. This is because it also explains various other phenomena at different scales. So some of the evidence in favor of dark matter are as follows. One of them is gravitational lensing observations. One of the most important such observations is that of the Bullet cluster. So in Clow et al., they compiled the weak lensing observations of a cluster merger. So in this figure, the contours represent the weak lensing observations, and the background colors represent the X-ray observations. So this shows that the spatial center of the total matter content of the mergers is here according to these circles, whereas the spatial center of the hot plasma or baryonic matter are the white regions in these points. So we see that there is a displacement between the spatial center of the total mass and that of the baryonic matter. So hence this shows that there should be dark matter to explain these observations, and it cannot be explained by modified gravity. Then there are other observations like the angular power spectrum of the cosmic microwave background and also large scale structure formation. So these observations cannot be accounted for by modified gravity theories simultaneously. Hence, dark matter is still the most accepted theory to explain rotation curves and also these phenomena. So now let me discuss the lambda CDM model, which is presently the standard model of cosmology. So this states that the universe is composed of ordinary matter, the cosmological constant lambda, and cold dark matter, CDM, that is composed of collisionless dark matter particles usually. This model is validated on large scales by observations of the cosmic microwave background, large scale structure formation, and also the accelerating expansion of the universe studied through cosmological redshifts. So the Planck collaboration measured the angular power spectrum of the CMB, which is shown here. So this shows the temperature fluctuations or angular power spectrum versus angular scale. The red points represent the data points, and the green line represents the lambda CDM fit to these data. So from the Planck observations, the composition of the universe was derived as follows. So it showed that dark energy composes approximately 68% of the universe, dark matter accounts for about 27%, and ordinary matter composes about 5%. So hence dark matter composes almost 84% of the total matter content of the universe. Even though lambda CDM works very well at the large scales, it encounters some problems on the small scales. Some of them are as follows. So firstly, there is the missing satellite problem. So N-body lambda CDM simulations, which use only dark matter, predict that there should be a large number of low mass halos orbiting the Milky Way and other similar mass galaxies. But observations of Milky Way satellites and field galaxies have discovered only tens of such galaxies. So it may be argued that we aren't able to observe all the predicted galaxies because they are too dark to be observed. But this too big to fail problem counters this argument. So it says that lambda CDM simulations predict the formation of subhalos, which are much too massive and dense to host the most luminous satellites of the Milky Way. So the most massive subhalos, which are predicted by simulations, should you host the most massive, most luminous satellites, and it should be easily observable. But yet we don't observe as many as predicted by simulations. This is also confirmed in the study of dark matter halos of dwarf galaxies. Then the other problem is the core cusp controversy, which I'll elaborate on more. So lambda CDM simulations give rise to the Navarro-Frank-White profile, whose density profile is given by this expression, where ρs is a reference density and rs is the scale radius. So this profile has a central cusp, that is, it has a steep rise in the density in the inner radii, and it also has an inner logarithmic slope alpha equal to -1. But this prediction of a central cusp is not supported by observations of external disk galaxies. These observations instead prefer chord profiles, that is, they have a flat inner density profile and an inner logarithmic slope alpha equal to 0. So some of the chord profiles are Burckert and pseudo-isothermal profiles. So the Burckert profile is an empirical chord profile, that is, it is motivated by observations. So the density profile for the Burckert is given by this, where rho naught is the central density and r naught is the core radius. So here I show the density, halo density profiles for the Burckert and NFW. So the orange line represents the NFW profile and the blue line represents the Burckert one. So this is the graph of the density versus radius of the galaxy and within the galaxy. So we see that the NFW profile has a steep slope in the inner regions, that is a cusp, whereas the Burckert has an almost constant density in the center, that is a core, and in the outer regions, they have an almost similar profile. So we need a lot of data in the inner regions to distinguish between these two profiles. So the work O et al.
Excuse me. In the previous slide, you mentioned the scale radius. What exactly do we mean by that?
It's just like similar to a core radius, but yeah, it's just like the profile has two parameters, rho s and rs. So that's where both of them intersect, the Burckert and the NFW profiles. So it's just some reference radius and density used to define the profiles.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. So O et al., they used a sample of dwarf disk galaxies and they calculated their logarithmic inner slopes and they compared it with what we would expect from the isothermal profile, which is a chord profile, and the NFW profile. So as we can see, these dots which represent the data points prefer the isothermal profile rather than the NFW profile. Hence, this shows that observations of external galaxies usually preferred chord profiles. So there are some solutions proposed to this core cusp controversy. So one of the solutions is the lambda CDM plus baryonic feedback. So this accounts for feedback due to baryonic structures like active galactic nuclei and supernovae. So massive gas outflows from these structures could expand out the dark matter halos, and this would transform cusps into cores within the lambda CDM scenario itself. So one of the examples is the DC14 profile, which was proposed by Di Cintio et al. So this depends on the stellar to halo mass ratio and takes the baryonic feedback into account. But this is valid only in the range -4.1 to -1.3 for the stellar to halo mass ratio. So since this has a limited range of validity, we might also have to consider other dark matter candidates. So before I discuss other dark matter candidates, let me discuss the weakly interacting massive particles. So which is the prime particle candidate in the lambda CDM scenario. So these particles interact through gravitation and weak interaction with standard model particles, and they have a very high mass of about 100 GeV. Hence, they are slow moving since decoupling, hence the name cold, but they haven't been detected yet despite consistent efforts. Hence, let's discuss the other possible dark matter candidates. So one of them is self-interacting dark matter. So these particles interact with each other and they cause heating due to elastic collisions in the dense inner regions of galaxies. So this heating expands out cusps into cores, but these collisions are negligible in the early universe, hence they do not affect large scale observations like CMB and structure formation. The next candidate is fuzzy dark matter. So these are scalar field particles of mass approximately 10 power minus 22 electron volt. So on large scales, these also behave similar to CDM, but on small scales, the interparticle distances are smaller than their de Broglie wavelength and behave like Bose-Einstein condensate. Hence, these can also lead to the formation of cores in galaxies. Next is the warm dark matter. So this decouples from the early universe when it is mildly relativistic. This also can solve the small scale problems of lambda CDM. Next is axion dark matter. So axions are scalar fields which were introduced to solve the strong charge parity CP problem. They can be dark matter candidates if they satisfy some conditions, such as they should be non-relativistic, they should be abundantly produced in the early universe, and they have to be decoupled from baryonic matter later. Then a newly emerging dark matter candidate is primordial black holes. So these were hypothesized to be formed in the early universe due to the collapse of overdense regions. They interact very weakly with baryonic matter, hence they are valid candidates for dark matter. So efforts are being made to detect the gravitational waves caused by their mergers through laser interferometer space antenna and pulsar timing arrays. Now let me move on to what I actually did in the project. So my project had two parts to it. In the first part, I studied the dark matter halo of the Milky Way. The aim was to construct an extended rotation curve of the Milky Way from various kinematical data sources and also to model the dark matter halo of the galaxy by fitting the rotation curve. In the second part, I studied the dark matter halos of massive spiral galaxies. Here, the aim was to model dark matter halos of a sample of massive spiral galaxies using their rotation curves and surface photometry, that is, the surface brightness profiles. Using this, I aim to investigate the presence of cores in the dark matter halos and study the implications of these results for the nature of dark matter. So firstly, let me discuss the rotation curve of the Milky Way. So rotation curves of spiral galaxies are calculated by measuring the recessional velocities of different parts of the galaxies through Doppler shifts of spectral lines like the H1, H alpha, and others. For external galaxies, we subtract the systemic velocity from observed velocities and correct for the inclination to obtain circular velocities. But for the Milky Way, it is a bit more complicated. This is because we are moving observers inside the galaxy. And also there is uncertainty in the values of V sun and R sun, that is the circular velocity at the sun's location and the galactocentric radius of the sun. Hence, we need to combine various indirect kinematical measurements to construct the rotation curve. Some of them are H1 terminal velocities, stellar velocity dispersions, and major circular velocities, which I'll discuss further now. So the first data set I used were H1 terminal velocities of the region inside the solar circle from the work Nesti and Salucci. So this diagram represents the measurement of the terminal velocity. So this is the location of the sun, and this would be the solar circle, and this is the galactic center. So the velocity of the H1 gas in the direction of line of sight is measured, and that is known as the terminal velocity or the tangent point velocity. So this Vt, that is terminal velocity, is converted to circular velocity using this relation Vc equals Vt plus R by R sun V sun. So this is because Vt is actually the relative velocity of the arm of the galaxy with respect to the sun's velocity in the sun's component, the velocity component in the line of sight direction. Hence we obtain this expression, and we assume the values of R sun and V sun as follows according to previous works. Next we adopt disk tracer star velocities from Crosta et al. So these are velocity data of stars which trace the disk of the galaxy, which was compiled from Gaia Data Release 2, and it spanned the region 5 to 16 kiloparsec. The azimuthal velocities obtained from the data were circularized using the Jeans equation for an axisymmetric disk, that is a disk which is symmetric along all axes in the plane of the disk. Then this was normalized to be consistent with our assumed values of V sun and R sun. Next, we use the Maser circular velocities from Reed et al. So in this, they compiled circular velocities of 147 molecular Maser sources from the Bessel survey. So Maser is just like laser, but in the microwave regime. And these are naturally occurring sources. So these data were binned into radial bins of width 2 kiloparsec. Finally, we use the velocity dispersions of K-giant halo tracer stars from the work DeCesare et al. A sample of about 5,000 K-giant stars in the outer regions of the galaxy were compiled, that is 20 to 130 kiloparsec, from the SDSS survey. So these trace the stellar halo of the galaxy. So the velocity dispersions were converted to circular velocities using the spherically symmetric Jeans equation. So velocity dispersion is defined as follows, that is sigma r square is average of VR square minus average of VR the whole square, where VR is the radial velocities. Then to fit this rotation curve, we need to adopt certain models of the galaxy. So the main components that we consider are the stellar disk and the bulge, which is a spherically symmetric region of stars, which is concentrated mostly at the center. And also there is a bar which causes non-axisymmetric motions, which is shown here, and also the dark matter halo. So for the thin stellar disk, I modeled it using a Freeman disk with exponential surface density. So this is the expression for the exponential surface density, where MD is disk mass and RD is the disk radius. So from this, we can calculate the circular velocity. So here we just do mv square by r, that is the centripetal force, equal to gmm by r square, which is the gravitational force. So this gives us v square equals gm by r, where m of r is the cumulative mass enclosed within the radius r. So we can calculate this m of r by integrating this sigma d, and we obtain an expression for the circular velocity contribution due to the disk. Here I naughts, INs and KNs are the modified Bessel functions of nth order. Next, there is the gas, which is negligible in our galaxy. Then there is the central bar. This is mostly concentrated within 2 kiloparsec, and it causes non-axisymmetric motions. Hence, this makes the inner velocity data unreliable. But outside 2 kiloparsec, this component is negligible. Then there is the bulge, which is concentrated within 1 kiloparsec. So hence, outside this region, we can just approximate it as a point mass at the center. So VB square is just GMB by R, where MB is the bulge mass. Then finally, the most important component is the dark matter halo. So here we use the Cord Burkert profile, whose density profile is shown here as I discussed before. And we can calculate the circular velocity contribution with this expression. Finally, the total circular velocity due to all the components is can be calculated by this expression, that is by just adding the components quadratically. So to fit the rotation curve using the above mentioned models, I use the minimization of chi-square statistic method. So chi-square is defined here. So this is similar to the least square method, except that it is weighted by the 1 by sigma I square, where sigma i's are the error bars of the data. Then we define another quantity, which is the reduced chi-square, which is chi-square by nu, where nu is the number of degrees of freedom, which is n minus m, that is number of observations minus number of fitted parameters. So this chi-square reduced statistic is important because it indicates the goodness of the fit. So if it is approximately equal to 1, it indicates that it's a good fit. If it is much greater than 1, it shows that it is a poor fit. But if it's much less than 1, it indicates that there is overfitting or that the error variance has been overestimated. So we have 5 free parameters in our model: the disk mass, the disk radius, the bulge mass, the central density, and core radii of the Burkert dark matter halo. So we fit the rotation curve, combined rotation curve. So here the red points indicate the H1 terminal velocities, the black ones are the Maser velocities, the blue ones are the disk tracer velocities, and the green ones are the outer halo tracer stars. So we use these constraints on the disk mass and bulge, disk radius and bulge mass because of because these are quite well determined by previous works. And we find a best fit model, which is quite a good fit to the rotation curve, because the reduced chi-square value is 0.44, which is less than 1, which shows that it is quite a good fit. And this shows the 2-parameter confidence interval plots, where the blue, green, and yellow regions represent the 1 sigma, 2 sigma, and 3 sigma confidence intervals. So we see that all the parameters are quite well constrained too. So this shows that the Cord profile is also quite a good fit to the Milky Way's rotation curve. Now let me move on to the second part of the project, that is the dark matter halos of massive spiral galaxies. So before that, are there any other questions in the first part?
There are no questions in the chat box.
Okay. I'll move on then. So Cord profiles are found to provide good fits to normal spirals, the Milky Way, dwarf disk galaxies, and also low surface brightness galaxies. But one of the class of galaxies which are not quite well studied yet are massive spiral galaxies. So these have high luminosities and high circular velocities reaching more than 250 kilometers per second. So in the work Yegorova et al., they studied the rotation curves of a sample of 30 massive spirals, and they found that they were baryonic matter dominated. They also found that these have a discrepancy with the NFW profile. So this is because they have shallow inner slopes, and hence there is a possibility of cold dark matter halos. Hence, I attempted to study these rotation curves of massive spirals and decompose their rotation curves to investigate this further. So for that, I needed to select a sample of massive spiral galaxies, for which I used the works Yegorova et al. And Lely et al. And I imposed a selection criteria on the galaxies in these works. Firstly, they need to be nearby spirals because if they are far away spirals, that is high redshift ones, they will be evolving and their physics would be more complicated. Then we also need that they need to be late type spirals, that is a more dominant disk than bulge, and their inclination angle should be greater than 30 degrees so that they are not face on galaxies. Their photometry should be available, and the maximum circular velocity attained should be greater than 250 kilometers per second. And also their rotation curve should extend beyond at least 3 times the disk radius. On imposing these selection criteria, I obtained a sample of 14 galaxies. So these galaxies were again modeled with similar models as before, that is with the thin Freeman stellar disk, the Burkert dark matter halo, and also the bulge. But this time I either use a point mass or Sersic profile to model the bulge. So this is decided based on the bulge disk decomposition of surface brightness profiles. So the Sersic profile has an intensity profile as shown here, where n is the Sersic index or concentration parameter. So this shows the circular velocities due to Sersic bulges for different Sersic indices and also for the point mass. So this is the circular velocity due to a point mass, whereas the ones due to Sersic bulges are less concentrated than a point mass. And we also see that as n increases, the concentration of the bulges also increase. So using these models and the chi-square minimization technique, as I explained before, I fit all the 14 galaxies rotation curves. Here I just show 2 examples. So this is for the galaxy NGC 6674. So we see that we get quite a good fit. So here the green one is the disk contribution, this is the bulge contribution, and this is the dark matter contribution. We see that all the parameters are quite well constrained, and also chi-square reduced is close to 1, so it is quite a good fit. But then we see the other galaxy, that is NGC 3992. Here we have very few data points and also no data points in the inner region. So this leads to not well constrained parameters. So we see that the central density that we obtain has quite huge error bars. So this fit is unreliable. So hence I don't use this galaxy for further analysis. So now let me summarize the results that I obtained for the remaining 13 galaxies. So it was found that the cored Burkert profile provides a good fit for the dark matter halos of massive spiral galaxies. They all have large cores with core radii are not greater than 10 kiloparsec, and they have the logarithmic stellar to halo mass ratio greater than minus 1.35, except for 2 galaxies, and they are baryonic matter dominated up to the optical radius. So these give some implications for the distribution and nature of dark matter. So this suggests that large cores cannot be accounted for by the lambda CDM model, even when coupled with baryonic feedback due to supernova explosions, AGN, etc. This is because gravitational potentials are very high and would counteract any feedback that attempts to form cores. And then the DC14 profile, which I mentioned before, is valid only in this limited range, that is between minus 4.1 and minus 1.3. But we saw that in our sample, the ratio is greater than minus 1.35 for most of the galaxies. So the DC14 profile wouldn't be valid for those. Hence, we need to consider other dark matter candidates like warm dark matter, fuzzy dark matter, and self interacting dark matter. As discussed before, these lead directly to the formation of dark matter halo cores. So, now let me summarize the whole talk. Rotation curves of spiral galaxies trace their mass distribution and hence are useful tools to study the distribution and nature of dark matter. An extended rotation curve of the Milky Way was constructed by combining recent data like H1 terminal velocities, stellar velocity dispersions, and major recessional velocities. The galaxy was modeled using a thin exponential stellar disk, a point mass bulge, and a cored Burkert dark matter halo, as opposed to a cuspy NFW halo emerging from lambda CDM simulations, which are usually used in works. The cored dark matter halo provides a good fit to the galaxy's rotation curve. So these results help to calculate the local dark matter density and escape velocity, which are important quantities for dark matter detection experiments. And in the second part, a sample of 14 massive spiral galaxies was selected, and the dark matter halos of these galaxies were modeled. It was found that this type of galaxies have large cores which cannot be formed by baryonic feedback in the lambda CDM scenario. This gives a push to investigate other dark matter candidates apart from collisionless dark matter particles. More accurate modeling of the rotation curves and studying the relationship between parameters of luminous and dark matter structures will impose strict constraints on the exact nature of dark matter. So if you have any questions regarding these, you can ask, or else I can move on to my other projects.
There's a question by Neev in the chat box who is asking, do elliptical galaxies have dark matter halos as well? And how is it detected in them? Or is it hypothesized to be present in them? He thinks that he has heard only of galaxy rotation curves for spiral galaxies, but is it also present for elliptical galaxies?
Okay. So elliptical galaxies also contain dark matter. That's what it's hypothesized. But we hear of rotation curves only for spiral galaxies because spiral galaxies are the ones which are rotationally supported. So hence we can calculate the circular velocities and all that. But elliptical galaxies, they are supported by like velocity dispersions. That is, they have random motions. So usually there they don't calculate the rotation curves. They instead calculate the velocity dispersions, and from that again they can calculate the distribution of dark matter.
Someone has raised their hand. Uh,
Hi. Yeah, I have. So hi, I'm Sushmita. So yeah, I was wondering, did you find any correlation of the core sizes with the galaxy star formation properties?
We haven't studied yet because, as I said, we need more accurate modeling of the rotation curves to like find any correlations. So we are planning to use the surface brightness profiles to model the baryonic matter, and after that we'll try to find more correlations. So that is something that needs to be done more.
Thank you.
So should I move on to the other projects?
Yeah, there are no more questions in the chat box.
Okay. So in the first summer of after the first year, I had attended the NIUS camp at HBCSE TIFR in Mumbai. So there were like lectures and all that, and after that there were some selection tests, and if we were selected, we could do projects. So in that, I was selected for a project on the astroseismology of solar type stars under the supervision of Anvesh Mazumdar. So astroseismology is the study of oscillations of stars. So perturbations caused by turbulent motions in the convective regions of stars set up oscillations. So these are observed as periodic oscillations in luminosity. So from these we can infer the internal structures of stars. So there are different modes of these oscillations. One of them are G modes or gravity modes. So these are low frequency modes, usually prevalent in the interior regions of stars. So here there is a propagation diagram showing G and P modes. So the y-axis shows the frequency of the modes, and the x-axis shows the radius in solar units. So as we can see, the G modes are prevalent in the inner regions of the star and also have lower frequencies. And then there are P modes, which are high frequency modes, and they are prevalent in the exterior regions of stars. Then there are also mixed modes, which propagate throughout the bulk of the star. So as we can see, around 100 to 400 microhertz. So there could be a G mode at some frequency, and at the same frequency, there could also be a P mode. And since this region in between, which is known as the evanescent region, is quite small, this mode can propagate throughout the star. So usually P modes are the ones which can be easily detected since they are in the exterior, but G modes are quite difficult to detect. But through mixed modes, we can probe even the inner regions of stars. So in this project, I identified and characterized mixed modes in one solar mass stars and tracked their evolution with the age of the star. Then I also did a project at ICER on H1 line detection. So the H1 emission line has a wavelength of 21 centimeter and a frequency of 1420.4 megahertz. So this occurs due to the transition between the hyperfine levels of the ground state of the hydrogen atom. So we aim to detect this using a helical antenna in the axial mode tuned to 142.4 megahertz. And we considered the source as Sagittarius A star, which is the center of the galaxy. So this shows the H1 line detection setup. So this is the helical antenna, which was then connected to an amplifier, and then that was connected to an RTL SDR, that is software defined radio. So this is a cheaper alternative to usual hardware based radio signal receivers. So we tested this antenna using sun measurements. Then we pointed the antenna at the Sagittarius A star's location and detected the H1 line. So this shows the averaged power over time versus frequency. So we see two peaks. One of them is at 1420.4 megahertz. The other one is a redshifted frequency. So from this redshift, we can calculate the velocity of the arms of the galaxy. So this is one method to calculate the rotation curve of the galaxy, as I discussed before. In this project, I also learned a bit about the Callisto spectrometer, which is on the terrace of the main building. So this is shown in the background. So um, it's a dipole antenna, log periodic dipole antenna. So it measures the sun's radiation. So this project was done under a postdoc of Prasad Subramaniam. So if anyone is interested in the Callisto spectrometer, you can contact Prasad sir, but I'm not sure if it is still functional. Then in the summer of 2019, I did a project on the dark matter halos of galaxies from their rotation curves using software known as GalPac 3D. So this was done at ENS Lyon. So there was an ENS ICER partnership program. So from that I was selected. So GalPac 3D is an MC-MC based algorithm to extract morphological and kinematical parameters of galaxies directly from 3D data cubes, which was proposed by Boucher et al. So in this, I made use of the DC14 profile, which I discussed before. So the galaxies were modeled using stellar disk, Freeman and free Sersic index, gas with a constant surface density, and DC14 profile for the dark matter halo. Then I tested this code on simulated cubes representing different types of galaxies. Then I also attempted to apply these on real data from MUSE spectrometer on two galaxies with redshift approximately 1. So here is the one of the results that I obtained. So the black crosses represent the data of a simulated cube, and the blue one is the recovered rotation curve, along with the gray region, which is the 95% confidence interval. And this shows the MC-MC run for the different parameters. So this had a chi-square of 1.13, which is quite a good fit. Similarly, I did this on different simulated cubes and real data cubes. Then
so when you say data cube, what sort of data is there?
So 3D is like that is the position XY, and the third coordinate is the intensity of the galaxies.
Okay.
So I also did a few semester projects. I did a semester reading project on general relativity, black holes, and cosmology with Dr. Deeptimoy Ghosh. Then I did one on cosmic microwave background with Dr. Tarun Sauradeep. Here I worked on the dependence of angular power spectrum on cosmological parameters using a code known as CAM, that is code for anisotropies in the microwave background. I had also attended a camp for hands-on experience in radio astronomy at the Gauri Bidanur Observatory. This was during the summer after my second year. I had come to know about this because Prasad sir had nominated me for this. So in this, there were a lot of activities, hands-on activities on radio astronomy, and also lectures on radio astronomy and antennas, and also cosmology. So this was organized by IIA and RRI Bangalore. There are also many other useful summer schools and workshops on astronomy. So recently I had attended on a workshop on less traveled path of dark matter conducted by ICTS Bangalore just last year. And they also conduct various other workshops on physics and maths. And they had also conducted one on physics of early universe. So all these lectures are available on their YouTube channel, and you can take a look. And also you can monitor their website for any future events, public talks and workshops, especially third years and fourth years. Then there are also Ayuka summer schools. This would be quite useful for first and second years. And also Kodaikanal Observatory also conducts workshops and summer schools, I think. So you can contact Prasad sir in case he knows any such, if you're interested and if he knows such workshops. Thank you.
Thank you, Rakshita, for such a wonderful presentation today and for telling us about all your experiences and projects. It was a really nice experience. So I just wanted to ask some questions. So you have done so many semester projects. So how is the experience of doing a semester project with, like, you have some other courses also going on, and like, is it very hectic or is it manageable?
So I did semester projects in the sixth and seventh semesters. So the reading project on GR, black holes and cosmology, that was quite hectic because I had to read like and present every week. But the cosmic microwave background one was like, it wasn't that hectic because yeah, like I could do it on my own pace mostly. And in the second half, I had to go to Ayuka sometimes to communicate with a PhD student of Tarun. So that time I hadn't taken that many courses, so it was quite manageable. So it depends on the professor and what kind of work you're doing.
Hi, Rakshita. This is
Hi.
Srihari.
Hi.
Can you suggest some, like because since you have done a reading project, can you suggest like some books that someone can read for cosmology?
I didn't really read like any separate books on cosmology, but I think Padmanabhan's book is quite a good reference.
All right.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
So are there any other questions related to the project or just general questions too is fine?
During any of your projects, did you feel like everything you are doing is being suggested by a professor, or did you also like propose some new things which you wanted to do, especially in earlier projects?
Mostly, like, yeah, most of the ideas were suggested by the professors, but some of the techniques and something codes and all, those I did on my own. So in BSMS projects, usually that's the case, especially in astronomy, I think.
And like, were most of your projects computational, or were there some like non-computational aspects also?
Yeah, so the H1 line detection one that I told, that was the only non-computational one that I did. So it was mostly instrumentational. I just did that for trying out, but I felt that I'm more inclined towards computational work. So most of the ones that I've done are on computational work only.
Okay, I see. Arun Ravi has a question in the chat box. So he is asking, where will you be doing your PhD?
Okay, so I'll be doing it at New York University. So it has a center for cosmology and particle physics, and a lot of professors work on dark matter too, on the interface of particle physics and astrophysical approaches. So that's where I'll be doing my PhD.
Then Neve has a question in the chat box. He is asking, I have also heard that some of the Milky Way satellites, might have been stripped and they turn up as globular clusters in a galaxy. Is that accounted for in explaining the fewer satellites problem?
Um, yeah, I haven't really read much about the missing satellites problem, but yeah, I think it's accounted for in this too. There are many explanations. Yeah, so the other dark matter candidates might be one of the explanations, and this stripping could also be another explanation. I haven't really looked at that much.
Pushpraj has a question in the chat box. He's asking, because right now we don't have cosmology course in fifth sem, but in seventh sem. So what will you suggest for studying the subject and different topics? Could you please give some suggestion about projects and all?
Um, so if you want to do theoretical cosmology, then you would have to study some general relativity too. And but if you want to do observational cosmology, I think you can start off directly. So for cosmology, there is a book by Scott Doddelson known as Modern Cosmology. So you can take a look at that. And for general relativity, uh, there's a book by Sean Carroll. That is what is usually used in the course. And also, there's a course by Sunil Mukhi on general relativity, which is available on YouTube. So you can try to look at that. Or if you directly want to go into cosmology, there is a great course by Leonard Susskind. So that doesn't really need much background knowledge of general relativity. So I think that would be a good place to start. And also you can talk to professors like Tarun Saradeep or anyone at IUCA to suggest some reading about where to start off.
Okay, I had just one final question. If you
Okay.
have, like, if you want to study about the nature of dark matter,
Hmm.
and at the interface, so like it has an interface with particle physics, right? Like
Yeah.
physics beyond standard model. So, like, do you need to study quantum field theory and particle physics at a very deep level to go into that? For example, would I need to take the quantum field theory courses, if I want to study these topics?
So it depends on which approach you're taking. So in my case, I took the astrophysical approach. So I didn't really need much quantum field theory and all those, because there have been many works which have already calculated the profiles from those models. But if you want to explore the different dark matter candidates, from a particle physics point of view, then yes, you need quantum field theory and particle physics courses and all.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay.
So we have crossed the 1 hour mark. So if nobody else has any questions, I would like to stop the recording here. And thank you once again, Rakshita, for such an amazing talk and for guiding us. I thought it was a really nice experience. And all the best for your PhD.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for giving me this opportunity and inviting me.
Okay.
Okay then. Thanks.